Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe.
So before I actually get into today's episode, I just kind of wanted to take a moment to talk about the Parkland, Florida shooting, because I'm recording pretty much almost a week after that happened. And, I don't really bring up controversial or try not to bring up controversial things on the podcast, but this is something that, it might be controversial, but we have to address it. And I think we educators understand that changes need to be made. And I don't think anyone has all the answers, but I think something that is clear is that there are probably many factors that are going to go into this. It's not just one thing that needs to happen. I think there are many different things that have to happen. One of them being gun control. I mean, I don't really understand. I don't understand why we how does a 19-year-old get access to a rifle? And someone who, from what I have heard in the reporting, who was diagnosed with depression, or who was depressed. I guess I don't even know if he was diagnosed. And sometimes someone doesn't necessarily have a diagnosed mental illness or some type of condition. But why does a 19-year-old, need a rifle? And I would also argue why really does the average population need that? So yes, I do think that is absolutely one thing that needs to be looked at, because that's unfortunately that seems to be one of the weapons of choice. I keep seeing a lot of memes and things about, this has been used and that has been used. A rock was used and killed someone. Well, yes, but that's not used. And you can't really, the destruction, its destructive potential is not quite as massive as some of these other weapons that are being used. So we have to look at reality for what it is and for what's happening, not necessarily how we would like it to be. Obviously, anything's a potential danger. But we have to look at what is the reality of what's happening. I also, I think there's so many different changes that can happen in terms of looking at a school's safety as well. When I think about our own school, we are closed off. We are walled in. I mean, when you're inside the school, it feels very open, so you don't feel like you're walled in, but there's a wall. Someone cannot just walk onto campus, and I feel like schools in the States are very open. Anyone can just walk in on there. Now, obviously, it wouldn't have mattered in this situation because it was someone who was familiar to the campus. It would have been a known face. So again, that also is not the only answer. But I think it is a potential measure that could be taken, is really looking at not having schools be so open. I mean, perhaps we hate to have to take that measure, but it is very possible to have a closed school, but not feel closed in. As I'm saying, we have walls around us, we have security. We also do have armed security on our streets at our school. And you cannot get in without a credential. So anyone coming in who is not already in the system, they couldn't just come in. They'd have to go through security. So it is, and security is very tight at our school, extremely tight. So I do think that's a measure. That doesn't solve everything, but it is another measure. But I also feel like, I really feel like we need to really look at, look at what's happening. Yes, be aware of mental health conditions, all of these things, and just really be aware of, which students are maybe in need, which students are being excluded, really doing some preventative things, looking at, I know we have so much anti-bullying, but a lot of character development, maybe even beyond character development and beyond just all of that, but really looking to create scenarios where we're helping students really focus on the emotional aspect and the social aspect, getting them to, helping them find a place to belong, because a lot of these are like marginalized kids. And we have to really examine that and, look at who can be, everybody should have an advocate. Every child should have someone out there cheering them on and someone who is there for them. So, looking at building those relationships, looking at helping students belong, finding a place where they belong. I mean, none of this is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And like I said, it's not one thing that needs to be done. I think it's multiple things. And even with as many measures as we take, inevitably you can't prevent every horrible thing from happening, but I think we can make a huge improvement in this area, because it's an issue. This is an issue. So something needs to change. And I also wonder, because, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I reside in Mexico. I'm American, but I've been living down here for almost 9 years at this point of my recording. And I know every country has its own issues, and I think we're probably well aware with some issues that Mexico has, but it doesn't have that issue. So one has to ask, what is the difference and what is happening? You have to ask that, because I know, and this probably sounds weird, because I know a lot of people think of Mexico and they think how unsafe it is, and of course, we have to remember that everything bad gets put out into the media. So if you're only seeing bad, of course you think that. And there are bad things that happen in Mexico, just like there are bad things that happen in the United States. There are bad things that happen in Canada. There are bad things that happen in every single country and every single city and every single place. So you can't get away from that. But that's not an issue down here. So I end up actually feeling much safer, especially as an educator. I feel safer down here. I know that sounds odd, but one of the things that I think about when I think about potentially going back home is that peace. It's very unfortunate, but it's a reality. But why is it a reality, and what can we do to change that? I think we really have to take this seriously. The country needs to take it seriously. And I'm so, so proud of the students who are standing up for this. It's so impressive. And I truly hope that their voices are heard. And I hope that we can all really gather and make a difference, because this is not easy. And so far, nothing we've done has helped. So I alone do not have the solutions, but the thing is, I wanted to mention this because it's been almost a week out, and I think it's important to address this. But yeah, it's many factors that are going to have to take place to make change. But there's one thing that is very evident. Change needs to happen because what we are currently doing is not working. So I just wanted to open up the show with that. So we'll continue on with the regularly planned show. And we're back. Welcome to episode 40. What a good place to be in the podcast. It feels amazing to have 40 episodes now. At this point, by the time it has been published, have 40 episodes out into the world. So thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode is entitled Textbooks and Worksheets. Can we throw these out? Yeah, so we're going to hit that topic in a minute. This falls within Series 6 Amazing Units by Design, but it's a tiny topic, one of those topics that is being published during a series, but it doesn't necessarily follow the series. You know how I like to do that, so I'm doing it. Okay, so just a few things I think before we get started with the wins and fails for the week. I just kind of want to share something, kind of a direction I'm thinking of taking the show. Nothing major, actually, pretty much the same thing. But I'm thinking of moving away from the series and not this one. I will finish the series. Series 6 will be completed. But after that, I am contemplating going away from a series-based podcast. And if a topic comes up that, you know, it's maybe a longer topic and it needs multiple episodes, well, in that case, it would become like a mini series. But I'm just finding that, I don't know, I kind of feel being with the series sometimes just feels a little, I don't know, constraining, I guess I'd like to say. When I started the podcast, I planned out all the series or themes, and that's how I kind of started. So for me, that was a good way to be able to think about the podcast and the direction I wanted to go. And I think it's worked really well for me in terms of, you know, knowing what I want to do, having something to follow, because you know that I like to have direction in my life. But I'm just finding more and more that these tiny topics come up. And yeah, I can always do like what I'm doing right now, just make it into a tiny topic and return to the series. Not a problem. But I think I'd like to actually start to do the opposite of that and just talk about topics as they come up, because that's a pretty easy thing in the life of a teacher. Always things are coming up, you know, maybe something that's happening in your classroom and you want to talk about it. And by you, I mean me. So it's what I'm contemplating. I really haven't made a firm decision yet, but just know that I am very much considering that. I just kind of feel like, I don't know, it would feel much more freeing. I wouldn't be limited by the series. Not that I'm truly limited now. Like I said, I'm doing a tiny topic right now. It allows me to step outside of the series and talk about something else. But I don't know. I'm liking the idea, people. Let me know if you have thoughts on that. What do you think about me changing the approach and not doing a series, but just, you know, a different topic a week and kind of going from there? Tweet to me. Let me know. Okay, so today's Tuesday, on the day that I'm recording. I'm actually trying to work ahead this week because we have family in town. They're not actually with us at the moment. They flew in on, when was that? Oh, Sunday. And they're right now staying at my husband's family's house, which is about an hour from where we are. But they will be arriving at our house, I think Thursday. So anyway, it's just going to be kind of a busy week. And so I just want to get some of this done. So so I'm kind of working ahead, which is nice. I mean, usually I've started to record by Wednesday, but I want to get as much as I can Okay, so let's get started with our wins and fails segment. Keeping in mind it's been a short week. It's only Tuesday. So, but I did have a win. Okay, so if you guys checked out episode 39, at the end we had our student segment where a couple of friends talked about the Paper Town math project that we're doing. And what I ended up doing is taking the student segment and uploading it into Google Drive. And then I shared the link with the parents because I wanted them to hear from, we've been, talking about Paper Town project, but I wanted them to kind of hear from the students a little bit about it. So yeah, so I sent that to them. And then I got an email from one of the students' mom, and she said, thank you so much for sending it, and that she said she just loved it and she listened to it like 20 times. So I thought that was really great. I love when they have reactions like that because, it's of course it's my hope too that they're enjoying those things as much as I do. Of course, a thing such as student segment, they wouldn't necessarily typically have access to because I don't always send them those things, but in this case I did because it just seemed very relevant. So anyway, I thought that was a big win because I loved that she loved that segment so much and listened to it over and over again. So big win. Big fail, not really teaching related, but yeah, not teaching related at all. Okay, so if you guys remember at the end of July, I had that whole hip drama that happened to me. And after 9 years in Mexico, I finally learned how private health insurance works because I have not needed it. They have these little pharmacies, and you can go into there. It's just kind of like a generic place, and there's a doctor. I mean, it's not like going to see like your regular doctor, but if something's going on, if you really needed someone, you could go and do that, and I tend to do that. I don't really get sick a lot, but when was this? Last year? No. Maybe 2 school years ago where I started to get strep throat. I used to always get strep throat, and then all of a sudden I got strep throat, and then it went away, and then it came back, then it went away, and it came back, and it was a thing. It was a whole thing. It was yeah. So I went to the farmacia then and got checked out by the doctor. So I was, it's very cheap to do that. So that's all I'd ever done in these almost 9 years. Well, when my hip thing happened to me, and if you haven't heard, well, it was just a hip thing. No big deal, except I was in a lot of pain. Ended up being a sprained muscle. But anyway, so this was my first time actually going to the hospital and having to get x-rays, having to get MRI. And so the way that your private insurance works here, it's much different than in the States. I don't really like it, I must say. You have to pay out of pocket first. So you pay cash. So you're paying for, I had to pay for those x-rays, had to pay for the MRI, I had to pay for the emergency room, I had to pay for this, for that. Anyway, it was 12,000 pesos. And anyways, I have to fill out paperwork and whatnot to get reimbursed by my insurance company. So, okay, so that all happened in the beginning of January. Today, as I record, is February 20th. I just today went to go turn that paperwork in. I think I've told you guys before, I'm an INFJ, and one thing that we are notorious for is we just cannot stand just things that don't seem meaningful. So like the mundane tasks, these things, like I'm sure people all over feel that way. I don't think that's really an exception to my personality type, but I think to the point that we just really put it off. I mean, I just dread things like that. But I mean, just like things that I feel like, oh, I could be doing so much more with my life. Actually, a student this year really, it was like he got me or I got him. We understood each other. I was like, oh, that's how I feel about these kind of things, where I stopped him because his laces were untied, and I'm like, please tie your shoes because you're going to fall. He was on his way to recess and he was like, oh, tying my shoes is so boring. And I thought it was really funny, but I also thought, oh, that's how I feel about so many things in life that have to be done. So I do them, but gee, they're so boring. But yeah, so anyway, so it's February 20th and I just went to go take the paperwork and of course was given another paper to fill out. So I'm actually not done with that process, but that's my fail because, like I could have had this stuff turned in, but I've been putting it off because I dislike doing paperwork. I really dislike doing paperwork. Okay, so, well, why don't we get started with the show, people? Why don't we get started? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what we're really here to talk about, which is not my medical stuff. So today's topic, textbooks and worksheets. Can we throw these out? Okay, so this was actually inspired by a direct message that I got on Twitter. I'll try to look up the name so I can give a shout out. So it's just someone who was just asking about my experience in the classroom with worksheets, and do I do a lot of worksheets, or what does that kind of look like? I'm totally butchering the way that was asked. But to that effect, the worksheets were brought up. Norden. So this was Norden. So big shout out to Norden. Really appreciate you reaching out, and I love connecting with other educators. I love when we can learn from each other. So much of what I've learned has been from Twitter. So I love it. Anyway, so that question really inspired this episode because my response was I use very few worksheets are being used. Textbooks, do I have textbooks I don't think I have any textbooks. I've gotten rid of whatever I had with permission. I do things with permission, always with permission. So, my kids did used to have these math books. They had like consumables and the hardcover books, and I don't use them. I've used the consumables in the past just because it's only fair if parents are paying for those that we're using them, right? I just feel like it's so much waste otherwise. And of course, even then I couldn't use like each page because I would just basically try to use what I can, but wasn't using like every single page because I don't think that's healthy. So after a couple of years of just kind of, using the workbooks and even that big hard book, I just was, using it under feeling like I'm obligated to use it, not really wanting to use it. And I'll tell you why, especially with math, but I just think, textbooks and workbooks in general. The thing is with math is that these concepts are so abstract that I feel like, students really need to be seeing what they're doing, and you don't really develop those skills in a workbook, right? So I can add a math problem together in a workbook, or I can see that math problem displayed through manipulatives and actually visualize that these are quantities that we're talking about, and actually manipulate it, construct these numbers, deconstruct these numbers, and I can't do that in a book. I just can't. A worksheet, a book is not really going to do that for me. And I don't know if I can preface this after I've started, but if I can preface, I'm not saying that never is a worksheet appropriate, that never can a textbook be used, because once in a while there will be worksheets, there will be something happening on a sheet. A lot of times though, for me, if I'm using a worksheet, it might be as like a sheet that you're recording, like maybe you're recording data on, you're recording your answer on, you're not It's not the actual work that you're doing. So let's say I'm working out this problem, and so I do my problem, and then I'm recording the answer. Maybe that's just a part of being accountable for the work. So I don't always do that. Sometimes students are recording things on their desks, and then I don't get to see it necessarily. I might see it as I'm going around, but it's a work surface because I don't feel like everything needs to be turned in either. So that's why, especially in math, where I just kind of feel like students need to understand what it is that they're doing, and I don't think they get that from sheets, and I don't think they get that from workbooks. And I know someone's going to make the argument, well, by the time they're in the older grades, they need to. That's, whatever, that's fine. Again, I'm not saying that no worksheet ever should be used, or no textbook, but I do think there's a pretty good argument to be made that, especially as they get up to the older grades, that's all they're doing. Where is the real life applications? How do they even know how it's relevant in their life? Or when and where to use those skills? Because all they've ever done is, on a worksheet. So I do think in general that lower elementary classes probably have an easier time with this because, we can see that these concepts are so abstract for our students that we have to help to make those very concrete. But I almost feel like at a certain point, once some of those concepts become concrete, then everything from there on out, even though now they're getting new concepts, are abstract, so they should still be working on them in ways that are, a little bit easier to make sense of. But it's almost like then it goes completely different, and then everything is done from a textbook or done in a workbook. And can you imagine if we tried to become musicians by only filling out a worksheet on music? I mean, that you couldn't become a better musician without application. How would you ever improve? So I don't understand why in some areas we really know this and we understand it. How do I become an artist? I probably need to have some major hands-on experience, but not filling in blanks on a worksheet, writing answers down. That doesn't improve my skills as an artist. So why do we think that's the case when it comes to all these other subjects? I don't know if schools now still use like grammar books and things like that. I don't know. We don't use that. That's always been the case since I've been at my school. Let's see. Yeah, this is my 6th year. I don't know why I always have to stop and think about it. This is my 6th year. We've never had books for grammar. And my students are second language learners. They're picking up the grammar just through authentic experiences. They're hearing the language, they're using the language, lots of read alouds, lots of questions and discussions, and of course incorporating music and songs, because I think that, where they can kind of hear the language being used and start to learn. True story. That's also one of the ways that I learn a lot of my new language and understanding how words in the Spanish language are constructed together. Now, even though I have been married to a Mexican man for 17 years, and of course using this language, he is also bilingual, so it's a mixed household of language. It's English and it's Spanish. Sometimes we go through phases where it's more mixed, or it's more English, or it's more Spanish. Also kind of depends on who we're around. So all of those different factors. But I have found in my own language learning that music, songs, is a great way to hear how language is constructed. The grammar piece of a second language or a third language, or a fourth, whatever it may be, the grammar can be very tricky because you automatically want to construct a sentence in, grammatically the same way that you would in your native language. And, sometimes that works, but often it doesn't. So it helps, the more language input that you have is obviously going to be very beneficial for your language output. So I don't look for grammar sheets to help my students improve their grammar. That would be really silly. No, but it's all that language that they are absorbing and also producing, because they are expected to speak English with each other. That's probably sounds much different than if you are an ESL teacher or you have English language learners in your classroom. And I know there you would really be nurturing the home language, and you definitely wouldn't be discouraging that use of language. But it's a completely different scenario here, because they're in the States. They go out in the world, they've got English. They go to the store, they've got English. Anywhere they go, they're surrounded by English. So they'll have plenty of opportunities to use this language that they are, mastering, working on mastering. But here it's a different scenario, very different scenario. So we're an we're bilingual speaking school. They get English and Spanish. But when they go out into the world, it's all Spanish. So they're for the most part. Well, when they go out in the world, yes, it is in Spanish. Some of them, all my students this year, none of them are native English speakers. So most of the parents speak English, but, they're speaking Spanish at home. So it's different. Their opportunity to speak English is at our school. So those opportunities are very much, it is encouraged that they're using our English class time to be producing the language. We do ask that because that's their opportunity. But they're not learning about language from a worksheet or a textbook. Of course there are literacy things that are directly being taught, and letters and sounds, looking at different spelling patterns. Of course all of those things are being taught, but I've never sat down and had an actual lesson on this is that. We do get into a little bit of verbs, because that just kind of naturally comes into our writing, because verbs and adjectives, because we're looking at how do I make my writing more exciting, how do I help the reader really understand what I'm trying to say. Well, I can use adjectives to really make my writing more exciting. I can use verbs to really really get to exactly what the characters are doing, use a little more exact language. So there are things like that do come in, but they're not with the intention, necessarily with the intention of, we're going to do a grammar lesson. It's just used because this is something that is going to enhance something else. So it's necessarily needed. But they learn how to construct sentences, and they learn about grammar just through the authentic experiences that they have. So I don't feel that that's it's necessary to have a workbook or a worksheet on that. Just my personal feeling. Now for their word work time, now there are papers that would be involved. We do Words Their Way, so if you're familiar with that, it's a lot of word sorts. And, it's word sorts that follow different spelling patterns. And so they're cutting up it's a lot of paper. It really is a lot of paper. I wish there was a better way. But, so they're cutting up their words and they're sorting it. It's not a worksheet, but it's on paper. You probably won't get away from using paper-like products. It is a very handy tool, I must say. Sometimes I have them do a write and draw on paper. So it is a sheet typically my sheets have 9 boxes. A lot of times I will give them 10 words that I want them to write, and then sketch what like think about what this word means, and then sketch it in the square, and they just do the 10th one on the back. So I don't know if that's considered a worksheet or not. I don't consider that a worksheet in the typical sense of when you might hear a worksheet. It's more like a workspace. They're kind of making it what they will. It's it's a tool, like I said. Let's see other cases. I mean, I'm sure there's other times that I'm using paper like products during word work. Well, sometimes they go on word hunts and they'll look for their snap words, or they'll look for words that follow whatever pattern they're working on. And they'll just have a recording sheet, and they'll go through their books and they write down. Well, sometimes it's not even actually, sometimes I have them do it right on their desk, because I don't unless I'm like, I want to collect this because I want to, view it for whatever purposes. So in those cases I would use something, but I'm trying to think any other time in word work. Sometimes I do other various things. Sometimes I do like construct a word, where they're given words. Okay, so they're given, so on a sheet of paper they might have their words that they're working on. Again, typically these are going to be your pattern words. These are maybe going to be your sight words. And then at the bottom they're going to have a list of letters, and they're going to actually build that word. It's just, I like that activity when they're really, they're still working on their letter knowledge. So by the end of our grade, they should have all 26 letter names and sounds known. But it does, it's nice for them to engage in those. I always have them, whenever they're working on things like this, I always encourage, you're going to have some kids who just don't, but get as many as you can. I try to get them to, as they're doing activities like this, to also say the letter names when they're working with it, because I just feel like it's another opportunity for them to be thinking about that and working on that. Oh, and I guess I kind of breezed over reading, but I think it goes without saying, when would you ever use a worksheet in reading? You read. That's how you would improve in reading. So I would never use, I don't know, are there worksheets in reading? Goodness, I'm really hoping that there's not. Because I kind of breezed over that, just thinking that was a given. But maybe there are reading worksheets. I really hope not. My kids work on reading by reading, and I would be conferring with them. They're going to also be sketching things out, like right now we're working on becoming avid readers, and how avid readers can connect to their characters by, really thinking about those feelings and emotions that characters have, which is really good, because I think it helps for them as they're also getting to know their own emotions and feelings. But in any case, so one thing they're working on right now is sketching out character feelings. So they will read a book and think about the characters and what they were feeling in different places of the book, and they'll do a sketch on their Post-it and then write the feeling, and then just stick it in the book to help them remember that, oh yeah, this is what the character was feeling at that part, and they might share it with their partner when they do partner reading. But so there would be absolutely no worksheets in reading. That just requires books, because you're reading. So no worksheets there. And then writing workshop, of course, there's no worksheets. You have writing paper. We don't use journals. We just use loose leaf writing paper. So they'll write that way and keep it in a folder. And then in math, as I already explained that, so there's no worksheets there, but I will say we have math journals. Really some really great math, well, I like them. I think they're great math journals that I've actually gotten from Teachers Pay Teachers, and I think almost our whole entire grade level at this point is using them. But they're just basically, they illustrate these math problems and work out these math problems. Like yesterday's, we didn't do today because I opened up workshop. Well, I'll explain that in a second. But so yesterday's was, there are 3 kids wearing mittens. How many mittens are there altogether? So they had to sketch it out. They had to do a number bond and number sentences. So in their math journals, it's always some kind of prompt, some kind of math prompt. So they're recording their work in this journal. So again, most of their paperwork, it's just kind of where they're working things out or they're recording their answers. And then, so my math time, basically I open up, I might do a number talk or sometimes I just kind of, if I'm reviewing, we might open up with some type of problem that we've been working on. Sometimes I open up with video, sometimes a video and a read aloud. So I try to do, not even a read aloud. Well, sometimes it's a read aloud and sometimes it's a shared reading, but of course they're math stories. So I open up that way, and then we go and we kind of do a warm up at our seats, and that's usually the math journal, or like today, it was a math game, a really fun one because we're working on numbers up to 20. And then I go into my mini lesson and I teach, and then they would go back and they would practice it. Typically, practicing a skill would be hands-on. It's typically all manipulatives, unifix, cubes, anything that's in the class. And then math centers, and again, it's a mostly hands-on. Sometimes I will include a color by number. So as we have now, we've been working on we've been working on addition since the beginning of the school year, but it was all just, very verbal and math stories and putting together those numbers, and then later added on number sentences. So as we've added on number sentences, I have had, I think about this last cycle that we just finished for math, color by number. So they work out a math problem and then they color the number. I'm sure we've all seen those. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of a worksheet. So I, once in a while have something like that. Like I said, I'm not saying a worksheet is never appropriate. Sometimes, I know that sometimes we'll use it. I'm not saying never, but I am saying I don't think it should be the bulk of what's happening in our classrooms. I really don't, because I don't, it's just not authentic. And it's those authentic experiences that are really going to really take a concept that can be very abstract and help to make it concrete for students. And I think, we need to help do that in the classroom. We should be helping our students with those kinds of skills. And that's the way that we can do it, giving them those hands-on experience for them. So that's it, you guys. With that, I am going to wrap this up. So that's it. It's a wrap for episode 40. I can't believe it. 40 episodes in. I'm so excited by that. But hey, I am interested in knowing, what do you guys think? Do you use worksheets? Do you use textbooks? Do you have thoughts about that? Tweet to me. My handle is at Tammy J. That's TAMI J123. I'll see you next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.